Hello everyone and welcome to TV Talks, the show where we take a look at both the good and the bad of what television has to offer. And continuing this 4Kids marathon, we have one of their very first shows, Kirby, right back at ya! Which is only the name in the English version. Similar to Sonic X, I will be looking at both versions here. But to be honest, it's not that different. There are changes here and there, but it's not entirely different. Because Kirby Right Back At Ya, for the most part, was made back when 4Kids actually made somewhat reasonable edits. Because again, I feel like I must elaborate. When they started off, 4Kids had a lot different standards of when they did later on. Later on, they decided to get really greedy and then make a bunch of unnecessary ones, and those are the ones we know today, with the exception of One Piece, but that one wasn't really their idea anyways. But that's a topic for another day. So Kirby, right back at ya, is obviously based off of the Kirby games. And for those like 3 of you who don't know who Kirby is, he's a lovable pink puffball from Nintendo who has the ability to copy foes' powers by sucking them up. And then he lives in a magical little world, and then all these kind of crazy things happen, and the games are a lot of fun, for the most part. There's a couple mediocre ones here and there, but to be fair, I haven't played them all. But Kirby is really popular, especially in the Smash Bros. Series. And so, Nintendo decided to make an anime based off one of their most popular characters, being Kirby. Still wonder why we never got a Mario one, but to be fair, we got the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, and that was a whole nother beast in and of itself. So this takes a lot of elements from the game, but creates its own different story, because Kirby isn't really a story-driven series by any means at all. And when you get down to it, it doesn't really have all that strong a continuity either, sometimes. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But this is about a town called Cappy Town, and a planet called Dreamland or Planet Popstar. It depends on the version. Popstar in Japan and Dreamland in America. And this place is run by the nefarious King DDD, a giant, angry, foul-tempered, bird-like creature who is so arrogant and self-absorbed that he feels like he can push everybody around and they have no way of fighting back, because they don't. So he really likes putting all the people in this planet, specifically in one town called Cappy Town, which obviously is inhabited by a bunch of creatures named Cappies, and then proceeds to exploit them and torment them for his own gain. He has a minion named Escargoon, who's always right there to support him, although he does deliver a lot of sarcastic quips. And he has a deal with an evil company called Nightmare Enterprises, and he keeps buying monsters from them. Yep, he purchases giant, evil, menacing creatures to terrorize his people. And he loves it. Only problem is, he never really seems to have enough money to keep paying off the debt. The Cappies don't like King DDD's evil rule, so they hear about a prophecy that a star warrior from far off distant space will come to Cappy Town and then save them all. Everyone's expecting a big mighty warrior, someone like Link or something, but they get Kirby. While a lot of them are pretty disappointed, they quickly take to Kirby after he stops one of DDD's monsters. However, Nightmare Enterprises hears about DDD's new adversary, and then they decide to help him get rid of Kirby by making all their monsters extra strong. So the series is about Kirby just kind of having a little bit of adventures in Cappy Town while also fighting off King DDD. Well, that's what they claim that the show is about, actually, because it's really complicated. In both the English and Japanese versions, that's kind of a subplot, really. I mean, there are a lot of episodes that do focus on it, but Kirby is not the main character for the most part. No, the real main characters are these 2 children, Tiff and Tuff, who are the son and daughter of one of DDD's advisors. It's basically their show. They're the ones that kind of oppose DDD from the start, and then Kirby just kind of goes along with it. They're the ones that orchestrate a lot of the plans. They're the ones that help Kirby fight. They're the reason that the plot moves along. And, well, obviously, they're really popular game characters, right? I mean, if they're going to be this prevalent... No, actually, they didn't appear in any game before or after. They're like Cosmo from Sonic X, where they're purely made for the show. And this is one of the big criticisms that Kirby Right Back At Ya gets, is that it's not Kirby's show, like kind of how Chris tried to take over in Sonic X. A lot of Sonic X comparisons here. But Chris wasn't successful a majority of the time. This is basically a takeover that already happened before we got here. This was Kirby's show in the first couple of episodes, but the first couple of episodes were kind of weak, mostly because they were setting up the story. But then things really get going and start picking up. But still, it's Tiff and Tuff's show, so it's Tiff and Tuff right back at you, not Kirby right back at you. And another thing that they get wrong is Kirby's personality. Kirby is so incompetent here. He has no idea what to do unless he's in the midst of a battle, and even then sometimes he gets the idiot ball. Ball, get it? Because he's a... never mind. They excuse this by saying that Kirby is a baby, which is all kinds of weird. But yeah, that's one of the big criticisms it gets, is that it gets Kirby's character wrong. But who they don't get wrong is King DDD. He's lazy, he's self-obsessed, he's maniacal, but he's also kind of shallow in his views. Being that he doesn't really plan that far ahead, he mostly aims for the short-term goal. Kinda reminds me of a certain American distributor, huh? 4Kids. Which, I don't know why, but the 4Kids version gives him a southern accent, so he kind of sounds like Yosemite Sam a little bit. And I actually like this voice, although it is a little weird. I do think it kind of suits him. And speaking of which, how do the American actors compare to the Japanese ones? They kind of play the characters pretty differently sometimes. In any animated show, no matter what country it comes from, a lot of a character's personality can be derived from their voice. And this is one of the cases when it comes to dubs that it's either pretty similar or radically different. Characters like Tiff and Tuff kind of resemble each other a bit, but characters like King DDD or Nightmare Enterprise salesman person, he's never really given a name, they have pretty different ones and ultimately kind of paints them in different lights. Both of them work though. And now it's time to get to the big question we're all having. How badly did 4Kids take a hatchet to this series? Not nearly as bad as any of their other shows. Like I said, this is when they cared. This is when they actually really wanted to make good stuff. And actually, it ended around the time that they decided to get greedy and shallow, so it just escaped the ultimate butchering. Ask anybody and they'll tell you this might be their best dub. When it comes to accuracy, at least. Because when it comes to writing, that's a different story. This is one problem that the 4Kids version and the original Japanese version have in common. The stories. Here's how it works. Kirby is obviously meant for children, and that's fine. Well, generally it's meant for all ages, but it's specifically kind of aimed at children, but in a way that everyone could watch for the most part. When they focus on generally episodic cartoony episodes that try to make you laugh and try to tell an interesting story, that's pretty good, and it's very well done. The writing is really funny in both versions. The animation is really well done, specifically at the freak out moments. It all works really well. However, there are those episodes where they will try to specifically game it extra for children and then try to teach a lesson, whether it be about pollution or the dentist or reading, and those are the episodes that suck. Ever since I was young, I've always had this perspective and it's never, ever changed. When they try to teach you a lesson, it's not that kind of subtle part that you really need to think about to really get the full message. No, they bash you over the head with it repeatedly. It's Captain Planet levels of obviousness, but that's not the only problem. The obviousness is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, the characters aren't extremely deep on this show. They're pretty simple with a few major characteristics. However, they either flanderize or just flat out change all of the characters every single time they try to teach a lesson. Specifically King DDD. Now, King DDD isn't exactly the brightest guy, but in the episodes where they try to teach a lesson, they make him an idiot. Just flat out idiot. That's not just 4Kids, that's Japan too, although 4Kids is guilty of making him an even bigger idiot than in the original, but even then, the original still does it, and it's still not who he's supposed to be. He's a bit short-sighted in his views, yes. He's a little bit greedy and lazy, yes. And he's also pretty irrational sometimes. However, he's not an idiot. He is there, though. And also, Tiff gets really stupid in those too. Because she's normally really intelligent, but now she gets really dumb. So does everybody, actually, except for Meta Knight, who's usually there to preach the lesson. And yeah, Meta Knight's in here, and he's got some sort of, I don't know, Spanish accent, I think. It actually kind of fluctuates here and there sometimes. It's very subtle, but if you pay attention, it'll kind of change here and there. Obviously, just in the English version. In Japan, he obviously doesn't have that, and he's portrayed pretty well. He's a bit mysterious, he's pretty dark, kind of stays out of the way. Of course, he will have some out-of-character moments here and there. To be fair, everyone does because, you know, the lesson stuff. But for the most part, he's portrayed relatively well. 4Kids 1, the changed dialogue really kind of represents the target audience. It's kind of simplified, it's kind of narrowed down, you know, that kind of stuff. And also, there are a lot of side characters that weren't in the games, but they are based off of things from the games, like the Cappies. There's Mabel, the psychic, who has absolutely no psychic abilities. There's the mayor, who's just kind of a strange guy who loves sheep. There's Ira, who's a spoiled brat. Kawasaki, who's a chef who just can't cook and is probably one of the best side characters. And there's just so many to list. Honestly, it feels really, really crowded because of this, but that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's bad because it leaves us less time to focus on Kirby, but it's a good thing because it gives us a lot of variety and a lot of characters he can interact with. And really, they're all likable, except for Takori. Takori is Kirby's caretaker, guardian? I guess he's kind of like what the Dursleys are to Harry Potter. They look after him while he's not doing much, and they don't really get along that well. He's kind of a jerk, and he's really flat in a character perspective. He's not very interesting. So like I said, the writing on the show is pretty well done on both sides, but where it really excels is the very well done fight scenes. They try to emulate the style that are kind of in the games, like Kirby absorbs something, becomes something like Fire Kirby, Ice Kirby, Funky Disco Kirby. And that's probably not a thing, I hope it's not a thing. But he transforms and alters his abilities. And then he'll use these newfound abilities to fight off the foe of the week. And these foes can be original characters with really cool designs, or characters from the game with really cool designs. As you can tell, the designs on this show for the original characters are really well done. A lot of detail and a lot of effort have been put into their designs and their animations. Everything works really well. You can tell that they really, really had a lot of ideas in this show, and they wanted to put them all out. And they did for the most part. There are a lot of really good ones in there. There's a dud here and there, but a lot of them do look really well done. So the action is the best part of the show, right? Yep, with the humor at the second best. But there are some times where it does take a really serious turn, because it is a cartoon that's mostly based off of humor and wackiness and silliness, but they take that action and that drama that they do really well, and then they expand it to full episodes. Like the one where there's that meteor that's gonna hit Cappy Town and everyone gets all scared and stuff, and DDD starts having a change of heart. Stuff like that. They're very rare, but when they show up, they're pretty good. And you'll find those episodes mostly in the two-parters. One specific example that I think is the shining example for these kind of episodes is the episode where the toy shop and the convenience store have a lot of excess inventory, so then they decide to combine them together and put little figurines into balls of chocolate, and they become extremely popular. But then DDD and Escargoon decide to get more control over Cappy Town by rigging him with new toys that turn into giant monsters and then destroy everything. It goes from kind of a silly, wacky one to a bit more story, and then all action in the second part. Although it had a little bit of pacing issues here and there, I thought it was really well done and the writing was really good, and especially the action. The animation for the action scenes are really good. And the animation for the show is really well done for the most part as well. I say for the most part because there's one thing I can never ever fathom with this show, and I never have understood, and I've looked high and low but can't find the reason for this anywhere. Sometimes DDD and Escargoon will randomly turn into CG. A lot of the time they'll be walking out in the palace or out in the yard or something in their normal traditional animation, but then all of a sudden we'll cut back to them and then there's CG. The only time this is consistent is when they go into DDD's throne room where he orders all the monsters. But even then, it has no real reason for it because the salesman is still in traditional animation. And it doesn't look right. I mean, the CG is fine for what it is, but it just doesn't really make sense. I don't know why they decided to do this random animation shift. I can't say if it works or not because it's just so weird and I have no idea what their goal was behind this. But I guess I'll give them a pass for it because it doesn't really affect anything. As you can tell, this is a show with very inconsistent quality. Sometimes we'll have a real dud episode, like the one about DDD going to the dentist, but then we'll have a real great episode, like the one where they make a cartoon. That one was hysterical. It was one of them that taught you a lesson, but that one was the only lesson that was actually subtle, and it was how the animation process works, and how if you don't put a lot of time, effort, and care into it, your cartoon is going to turn out to be, well, atrocious. And then that best part of that episode is when we see the final cartoon, because it's hilarious. And I don't want to ruin all the jokes, but there's one joke that has always gotten me to laugh out loud ever since I was little, and still does today. Is when they're watching the cartoon, and it's terrible. It's a bunch of scribbles. It's just barely even colored in the lines. It's just a bunch of blobs moving around. And then it cuts to this random, really well done and movie anime style for like 2 scenes, maybe, like for a total of 4 seconds. I just love that part. And that episode is filled with stuff like that. It's just nonstop joke after joke after joke. And it's great for a normal audience member, but it's even better for an animation person who knows how the process works. And because obviously, since the people are making a cartoon, they know how the process works. So there's a whole bunch of jokes just off of everything, from the character designs, to the script writing, to the coloring, to the cell process itself, everything. They make fun of everything, and it works really well. Now, I bet you're noticing something. Unlike a couple of the shows I've talked about, that thrive off story arcs, I haven't mentioned any because don't these kind of shows normally use story arcs? Well, Kirby is entirely episodic, except for a couple 2-part episodes here and there. There is one lingering story arc, but it barely receives any attention until the very end. It's that Nightmare Enterprises is owned by a sinister mastermind who wants to destroy all the Star Warriors and take over. So it turns out that this guy is the true villain. So in the end, Kirby, Tiff, Tuff, all the Cappies, and even DDD and Escargoon rally together to stop this guy's evil forces from destroying everything. It's well done with some good humor, a lot of good story, great animation, and some really good twists at the end. Overall, though, it gives the series a good end, and it's one that, to their credit, they stick to. This isn't like Sonic X where they have a really, really good ending and then follow it up with a terrible season right after it. No, they stick to their guns this time. 100 episodes is their limit. In fact, there's no way that it could continue. I'm not going to give it away, but, well, there's just no possible way for the story to continue unless some radical differences happen or they just decide to hit the reset button. And it was a very good end to a show that, while it had a lot of inconsistent quality, really did make a lot of people happy and a lot of people entertained. And those bad episodes are definitely outnumbered by the good ones. For every bad episode, there's 2 or 3 good ones out there that'll really make you smile. And that's why I give Kirby Right Back At Ya the Archibald seal of approval. While it's not the best show ever, and not even the best on 4Kids or FoxBox, it certainly is a good one and certainly worth your watching. However, if you don't like it, I totally understand. The show isn't for everybody, but it certainly is for me, and I do like it. Now, no episode is genuinely perfect. There are some flaws in every episode, but if you're willing to overlook those and just come in with an open mind, I think you might find some enjoyment in this show. And now it's time to talk about the theme song. The theme song has received a lot of notoriety when Mr. Enter put it in his top 20 worst theme songs ever, because he doesn't like 4Kids and he doesn't like a lot of their theme songs. A lot of people were kind of surprised at this one because it was really popular, but since then a lot more people have been saying that the theme song was terrible. I never got that. This is one of my favorite 4Kids intros. While the Japanese one is fine, it's just kind of a simple little kind of tune, just nothing that special. The English one is catchy. It's a big, jazzy swing style. It's a lot of fun. The lyrics are a little weird sometimes, but the singer's giving it his all, and the musicians are giving it their all. What's not to love? So, folks, this has been the TV Talks for Kirby. Right back at ya! Stay tuned as the FoxBox 4Kids Marathon continues. Don't worry, One Piece will be coming, just not next. Alright, want to see what we have next time? Well, tune in next time. Yeah, and I'm very good at outros, so see you guys later. Bye-bye.